Tommy from the Bartitsu Lab, and in this video we're going to look at boxing big motherfuckers. Now those of you who know me know I'm a relatively big guy. I'm about 6'3", about 18 stone, so I class as a super heavyweight boxer. But as you can see against Bob here, super heavyweight boxers can come in Bob size or above. Big motherfuckers. And in a previous video I looked at ways you can use weapons or other combative methodologies against larger opponents. In this one I just wanted to focus on the boxing side. Often when I'm sparring or getting ready for competitions or when I'm fighting in competitions, I might be up against guys this size because as soon as you get past that heavyweight, that super heavyweight limit, it just keeps going. So again, it's very possible, it's very plausible for me to be against people like this, and I wanted to go through some strategies, no matter what the height differences, how you can use boxing against a height disparity. So you might be a 5'6" guy fighting a 6'2" guy. It doesn't really matter. There's always some degree of height disparity that you do need to be aware of and train for, because it happens all the time. So let's look at some of the ways you can get in on a big juggernaut like this motherfucker using your boxing. A couple of things to be aware of. Obviously, with height, very often, although not always, comes range. So bear in mind that your main guns will often fail to hit before this guy's arms will hit you. Now I've got relatively long arms for a relatively short super heavyweight, so that helps me. That's a natural attribute that I can use to my benefit. But as a rule, taller the guy, longer the arms. And if he's punching down, he can get more torque into those shots, he can get more gravitational drop into those shots. In short, he can fire bombs at longer range than I can, which means I need to be hyper aware of the new danger zone. You know, against someone of similar height, it's pretty easy to gauge the danger zone, where you're in, what is a feasible hitting distance. Against a taller opponent, especially one that you've not sparred with or fought before, knowing that distance is really key. So avoid, if you don't know, don't guess. You know, it's okay if you can maintain an inch or two behind the length of their longest shot, but it's a high risk game. So if you don't know, don't take the risk. So either be all the way out, beyond the possible feasible range of his shots, or, much better, be all the way in. Now, whilst being all the way out, diving in, delivering a shot for points and coming out is possible, is doable, and people do it all the time. It's a high risk strategy. Fights aren't often won by being outside of the effective range. If I'm to accumulate points or to accumulate damage on him, me being all the way out is not a particularly smart way to get there. And it requires a lot of athleticism. So you need to have really good, if you look at a lot of the bigger amateur boxers, you need absolute monster cardio to be a fighter that's all the way out then all the way in. Because moving in and out in that extreme range requires really good footwork, really good energy, really good kind of stamina management to pull off, and that's quite hard to do. What most people end up doing is finding ways to get within the effective range of those shots, deliver punishment, and stay there. So again, we're going to look at some of the methodologies for that. So let's look at gaining ground. As I said, you can't fuck around in the middle distance here because you have no real idea of his true range. So you can't fuck around here. And being on the extreme outside requires a lot of stamina to get in and a lot of risk that you'll get hit by those 16-inch guns as you do it. So for me, there's two ways really to get in. Option A is you get very good at things like peekaboo. So you get very good at keeping it tucked, having aggressive footwork that moves in and out. You're moving your head, ducking, diving, bobbing, weaving as you work that peekaboo. The problem is that you could name successful peekaboo fighters probably on the fingers of one hand. It's hugely cardio intensive. You do tend to take a lot of hits coming in, even if they're gloved. The concussion of those shots will eventually start to tell, and they don't tend to have very long careers. And if you don't practice it, if you're not on it all the time, working that pendulum, that peekaboo motion, the attrition of it is huge. It will fade. It's a very perishable skill. So another option, which I prefer, is going a bit more old school, and you go with drop stepping or penetrative stepping. So from being out of range, you take a deep lead long step, so you end up almost in a lunge, and then essentially you attach yourself to that man like a limpet mine. And it needs to be aggressive and explosive and unpredictable. So you need to be moving on the outside, launch that step, bang, follow through, and essentially get head to chest as soon as you are absolutely able to. Now, a couple of things. When I do it, I tend to keep a tighter, more orthodox guard, and my mind is thinking uppercuts first. Because I'm launching in like this, I've dropped the body weight because I've done a pendulum step, so I'm already relatively low, as I've got here. It means that shots raining down from above, yes, they can clunk off the top of my dome, but my neck and my chin is covered and solid, so knocking me out is relatively hard. You will no doubt eat a few as you come in, because he knows your only option really is to come in, so you'll eat a few. But if you're tucked and they're coming down, the efficacy isn't great. But what you really need to worry for is a couple of things. One, those uppercuts coming up the middle, and that's why I go to great pains to make sure the chin is tucked. I'm really focusing on making sure I can shock absorb those uppercuts. That's my key worry. Him punching down with my neck in a solid state, bang, for the half a second it takes to get here. It's a worry, but I'm more worried about that uppercut cut right up the pipe. Another thing, he'll be very conversant in fading back and firing bombs. So obviously the smaller fighter comes to go in, the taller fighter, and often I am the taller fighter too, will be very aware to step back, bam, bam, bam. So the gains you thought you might have, you no longer have. So being able to fade back and fire bombs is very, very common and well known to taller fighters. So again, they can fade back, which means that when you think you've just about made it, it's in fact another half a metre away, punching you in the face. That can happen, or that sneaky bomb up the middle. But either way, I like a powerful drop step or penetrative step like a wrestler shooting from here, getting in. Once you're in, a couple of things that you want to do. You've got to remember that your head, in this instance, when you're here, as soon as you get here, you need to maintain this position. And bear in mind, using your head, essentially, I'll take the hat off so you can see what my head's doing. When we get here, the head is essentially like a third hand. So once I'm in, the head is moving, it's wrestling him, it's maintaining and indexing an attachment. So if he moves back an inch, I move forward an inch and a half. It's oppressively controlling him, freeing up both my hands to throw bombs. So you use the head as a third hand to position, move, muscle him. Now obviously if we're talking boxing, we've got to be careful. Luckily, because of the height disparity, I'm kind of muscling against his body. With more parity, you start to move into, this looks a lot like a headbutt territory. But with height disparity, it's expected that you'll get in close. So use your head as a wrestler might use his hands. And remember to use your hips, your shoulders, you're really driving this in, driving angles. So pushing him back, moving him to the side. So do put in the rounds on the bag, on the bob, on sparring partners, essentially keeping tight defense and move the opponent. It's a bit like judo kazushi, moving people around, only we're using our head. Wrestlers do this very, very well. Get used to cutting angles, turning, so you're turning yourself around the opponent or you're turning the opponent himself, you're driving him back, but essentially you're manipulating his position and sticking on him whilst allowing both hands to get to work. So using your head as a third hand, as a tactile sensor to know where he is, where his anatomy is. If I know that his solar plexus is here, I'm making a pretty good guess of where his chin is possible to be. So that's an important factor. So use your head as a wrestling tool. Now what types of shots work well for a smaller fighter? Once I've managed to aggressively gain that ground, from here, and I've used the head, what kind of shots? One of the first ones that I like is what I call a spike jab. So now, because we're closer, our feet are often a little bit squarer. So either hand could technically be the jab at this instance. And it's a short, sharp, upward jab underneath the jaw. So we get here, and bear in mind these can be relatively powerful shots, or they can be touches. But just because you're down here, the kind of the trend or the thing that people fall into is they get here and they just wail on the body. The problem is that if he's not worried about his face, he's going to cover his body up and survive most of these shots. He needs to feel threatened up top too. So that's where if we get in close and we pop a couple of these in, you start to take his attention up through the body too. So you may, once you're in, tap in a spike jab to get his attention up top and then hammer in, you know, hook to the liver, spleen, solar plexus or whatever. So you may get here, so you're wrestling around, spike jab, and then you throw in the shot. Moving around, and then importantly, when you finish that shot or your sequence, get back to the head wrestling. Get back to not just staying here, but moving on him, moving on him. But the spike jab, a little pop up, straight up to get his attention up high, bang. And you can throw some with venom, and some just as a tap to get that attention. Either way, very important. Tap and smash. Tap it and smash, or smash and smash. Or either way, that spike jab I find at hyper close range is a good tool to keep him guessing. Other things, so travailing body hooks, and by travailing essentially means sidestepping. So using my head, if I'm going to hit Bob, if I angle myself to one side or the other, I get out the danger zone for the uppercuts and I make it awkward for him to hit me. So if I get my head centre, I might start to move my head towards where his right hand is, because if I move my body to where his right hand is, his likely power hand, I smother that shot. It's hard for him to activate that right hand while my body's here. It's very difficult. And not many people are very good at downward left hooks. You know, it's an awkward position to get him in. So if I travail, so I sidestep and I hit, I smother one arm while hitting another place. So I might be here, I'll sidestep and hit. Here. And again, keeping head pressure directly afterwards. Centre, I travail, so I sidestep in a parallel fashion and smother. And if I was moving the other way, and straight back on him. So again, being able to travail, so sidestep and hook, sidestep and hook, sidestep and uppercut, sidestep and uppercut. Essentially moving in and around his waistband and torso area, smothering his left or his right hand. Not just staying in the middle. If you stay in the middle, both hands have equal chance of clubbing you. If I start to move myself to get in the way of that arm from here, I've got options here. I smother some of his work. I throw mud in his machine. So again, using your head as that sensory tool and being able to deliver those hard shots are key. I'd also say as a smaller fighter, you need much more anatomical awareness of where the liver, the spleen, the solar plexus are. Understanding these places, understanding liver, spleen, solar plexus placement is really, really key. How to punch just underneath the heart. It's not some high-end karate temiwaza bullshit, but you need to know what you're hitting, because it can be very easy as a smaller fighter to end up here and just mindlessly wail. This is gloved boxing. So again, if I'm hitting something that's just flesh or muscle, I'm not going to cause that much damage. So I need to be thinking, what gets me into the spleen here? Viciously, aggressively attack the organs, because you can't survive a long trade-off against a much bigger opponent. So every shot you do throw should have some venom on it, but also high degree of accuracy. So make sure you focus on your body anatomy. There's lots of organs here that when you hit them, causes them a very bad time. Anyone that's been hitting the liver would rather trade 5 punches to the jaw than 1 to the liver, and I fucking would. So again, learn where your liver, your spleen, your solar plexus are. Get used to just tap sparring, being absolutely accurate. So get here, you don't need heavy contact. Gets me. Liver, spleen, boom, boom. Learn where those places are. It's really important. And get one of those anatomical rash guards. You can put it on a bob, you can put it on a bag. You can get used to throwing in shots under the heart into that liver. It's a useful tool. Okay? Another thing that you may wish to consider is elliptical overhands. If you watch a boxer called Derek Chisora, he does this quite well. You know, again, he's a big guy, but a small heavyweight. So again, when he comes in, his travail, like I talked about here, so his penetrative step, he might A, come in on a penetrative step with the overhand. Often it won't land or it will be blocked because it's coming at range. But the whole point is to stop you being punched on the way in. So as I step in to crash, whop, you throw some shit in a short, sharp, elliptical motion. In this instance, just to get his hands and his attention up high so I can get my body down low. Whop! At this range, often it won't land as well as you want it to. But that doesn't matter. It's just allowed me to get here, eating the least or the fewest possible punches. So again, there's ways to use the overhand just to gain ground, but it very rarely hits clean. So you step and overhand at the same time, just to end up in this position, and then you can start to get to work. Or, once you're here, you can then throw it, this elliptical fashion, like you're throwing a ball, over the top. Because it goes above your shoulder, it doesn't carry the same power as it would against a similar heighted person. So a similar heighted person, as soon as it goes above my shoulder, I can't put nearly as much power or source on it. But again, important things here, to give yourself a bit of space to pull it off from the head wrestling, turn the shoulder. So turn the shoulder, keep the pressure on with the shoulder, and that gives you a bit more room to fire the shot. So from the head, shoulder pressure, so here you're head wrestling, shoulder pressure, turning the shoulder. Once you've got head on chest, turning the shoulder opens up an arm for you to fire in those hooks or those overhands. So from the head, get the shoulder in. So do experiment with using your shoulder to open up and wind up your body for those powerful shots. So from the head wrestling, get very good at head wrestling, turn a shoulder, back to head wrestling. Important tools. Another thing you want to look at is what Teddy Atlas calls going in the foxhole. So if you're shooting, you're in a shootout, bang bang, you're hidden in that foxhole. With him, if I fire a couple of shots, let's say I'm here, I turn the shoulder and I go 1, 2. Okay, so I'm here, I sink, so I go into my foxhole. I get even lower. Mike Tyson was very good at this. If you squat relatively low on here, it's very hard for him to outmuscle you, wrestle you, lean on you, or hit you, because you're beyond the practical range for him to do so. So again, getting good at firing bombs that ended up in a deep oppressive squat, being here, being low around the waistband as if you were a wrestler. Again, using that head and shoulder wrestling. Being able to fire shots. In this instance, I might do a spike jab, a body hook, and then end up in the foxhole. And end up down here. And then might pop the shoulder and throw that elliptical overhand. Either way, it works because as soon as I'm in that foxhole, it's hard for him to hit and wrestle me, and it's quite easy for me to explode back up. Explode back up using leg strength to put some power behind the shot. So get used to head wrestling, using your shoulder to make a little space, hitting, and then when you're trying to be safe, sinking into the foxhole. Again, using the head, using the shoulder to muscle, to manipulate, to unbalance. But that rapid sinking motion is really disconcerting, and it allows some real power shots coming up from the legs. You know, so get used to sinking in that squat, and as you burst up, fire that material. Deep squat head wrestling. You can get good at being very explosive using upwards power as well as you would against a normal sized opponent using torque. So again, some useful tools there. But I'd say for boxing a bigger man, to re-summarise, be very careful how you get in, but you will eventually have to get in. And for my money, watch out for the uppercuts. So travel in, thinking uppercut first, keeping your head protected from that downwards barrage. But get used to explosive drop stepping. Get here, right in on him. Use your head to wrestle, manipulate space to create opportunities. Keep him off balance at all times. Use your shoulder to open up one arm. So from the head to the shoulder to the shot. Make sure you get in that foxhole before and after. So again, you're out of his ability to lean on you, to wrestle you, to hit you particularly hard. And then factor in your ability with some of those better shots against taller opponents. So anatomically know where your body hooks and your body uppercut should go. Get good at elliptical overhands. And those spike jabs. And remember, don't just get close to the body and mindlessly wail. Be a bit more clinical with it. So once you're here, I might be thinking, you know, right, I'm gonna go under the heart and on the chin. And straight back in. Be clinical with where you hit. And that requires you to be able to look at where you're hitting. So that's why that shoulder pop or decent head control, so I keep him off balance. You know, look at what you're hitting, or be aware of what you're hitting, I would say more accurately. Don't just wail at the generic body. Aim for stuff. So again, foxhole, spike jabs, jumping, head wrestling, shoulder talk, all of these are really important. If you find yourself fighting bigger opponents, and you don't want the first time for you to have practiced it to be the time you need it for real. So make sure you hinge up your bobs, hinge up your bags, get used to some of the techniques for taller opponents, which will very often be different from your general modus operandi. You know, as a boxer, I'm more of a kind of finish-shell guy. I like to throw range if I've got that range. But often, I'll also fight some big motherfuckers. So I need to get used to what differences in technique, footwork, strategy I need to deploy against bigger guys. So even if you're a short guy, or even if you're a big guy, there's always a bigger fish. Get used to the repertoire you need to defeat big Hodor looking motherfuckers like this. Enjoy!